Hi, everyone, and welcome to the second installment of our LinkedIn Live series, ISM World 2023, The People You'll Meet. My name is Dan Zeiger. I've been a part of Institute for Supply Management for 7 years as senior writer and copy editor for Inside Supply Management magazine, and we're excited to have you as a part of today's event. Once again, we're going to spend time with some of our session presenters, 3 of the people you'll meet at the conference, which is this May in Grapevine, Texas, just outside of Dallas. The next 30 minutes are designed to be an interactive experience, so feel free to like and share. Today, you'll learn a little bit more about the conference, as well as our session presenters. And before we get started, please comment in the chat feature on where you're joining us from today. And we'd love to know if you've already registered for ISM World 2023. And also feel free to ask questions throughout today's event, and we'll be sure to address them by the end. This is the preview of one of our many breakout sessions over the 3 days of ISM World 2023. And this session is titled Successful Implementations Begin at Procurement. Great idea, terrible execution. How many times have you heard or thought that about a product or service that had a smooth procurement followed by a disastrous implementation? And suddenly your organization is spending more time and more money while executing more change orders and wondering, how did we get here? Well, instead of asking that question, let's ask some preemptive questions to our panel today because they are eager to discuss optimizing your procurement process to result in a smoother implementation. So let's say hello to our 3 subject matter experts. They are from Citizens Property Insurance Corporation, which has offices in Tallahassee and Jacksonville, Florida. First is Jessica Chapman. She's a CPSM and a CPSD, and she's Assistant Director of Purchasing. She oversees the procurement and contracting functions across all spend categories. She has more than 15 years of experience in public and private procurement, contracting, negotiation, and supplier management. Stephen Guth, who is a CPSM, is Vice President of Enterprise Services, and he's a seasoned supply management professional, including for such companies as Aflac Insurance, Dell Computers, and Ryder Systems. He's also a licensed attorney and is a member of the Armed Forces with the U.S. Special Operations Command. And finally, Spencer Kraemer is Senior Director, Vendor Management and Purchasing. He is also a licensed attorney and certified contract negotiator who has served as an in-house counsel, procurement team member, business unit manager, and purchasing director, among other roles. So welcome, happy Valentine's Day to you all. And it's appropriate that we're all here to discuss our first love, well, maybe our first professional love, which is procurement. So Jessica, I know this is a topic that you guys are really passionate about. And just to get started, what was it about ISM World 2023 that you guys felt it was important to bring your message there? And as a procurement practitioner, what is the value of attending a session like that, a conference like that with other like-minded professionals?
Yeah, you hit it, Dan, and good morning. Attending ISM World 2023, I could kind of go on and on about why to do it, but for many, this may be the first conference back in person, and the ability to interact and develop those relationships and network is such a different experience in person versus in a virtual environment. But also ISM is regarded as really one of the preeminent organizations, or the preeminent organization in supply management in the world. And the caliber of people and the depth of knowledge that you're going to gain from the content is just phenomenal. It's always an event where I walk away feeling energized and excited about the industry for the next year to come. It kind of gets me going again.
Yeah. Well, let's get down to the rubber meeting the road and the topic of your session. I mean, when I chatted with you guys last week, Stephen, you said this is an issue that has gotten a lot more complicated in recent years. Could you just elaborate on that and as well give us an overview of your session?
Absolutely. Dan, first, I want to say thank you for having us. Jess, Spencer, and I, we are looking forward to another information-packed ISM World Conference. We are especially excited this year because we have a great session planned. The session that we'll be delivering will provide conference attendees with what we think are concrete solutions to an important emerging problem, implementations. And over the past few years, it seemed to me that vendor-led implementations were just becoming more problematic. And I'll give you some examples. Disconnects between what the customer wanted and what the vendor thought that the customer wanted. The vendor not wanting to implement certain things that the customer wanted because it didn't fit the vendor's product roadmap. Or the customer just not being ready, even though they've gone through this this procurement process, they're not ready at the end of it for the implementation. So the result of those things are implementations gone wrong, the customer walking away, even the vendor walking away, and even worse, when the contract disputes approaches the level of litigation. And as supply management and procurement professionals, the last thing that we want is for deals to haunt us, right? We need to get a deal done. We need to get it done well, and then we just need to move on to the next thing that is coming down the tracks. So at first, when it came to implementations, I was wondering if it was just me thinking that implementations were becoming harder and more complex, but it dawned on me slowly, unfortunately, that yes, they were becoming more difficult, and that there were two major emerging factors that were really at the root of it. One is the cloud, and the other is the agile customer. So cloud vendors are what I would call the Henry Fords of this era, but for technology. You can have your technology, your software as a service, any color you want, as long as it's black. Cloud vendors, they want everything to be standard. They want a standard contract that they don't want to deviate from. They want a standard implementation. They want a standard configuration that a customer fits into. Basically, they want everything standard except maybe for some minor configuration. And at the same time that cloud was becoming a thing, so was agile. And everybody has been jumping on the agile bandwagon, and for good reason, because it works. It delivers value early and often to the customer. And I think, Dan, as many of your viewers know, agile delivers in small increments, typically 2-week sprints that fit within a 3-month program increment. So with agile, delivery teams have these short-term objectives and the ability to pivot the resources on a dime to what's most important to them. And that's where the conflict lies. On one hand, you have a cloud vendor that is highly standardized, Henry Ford assembly line business model. And on the other side, you have customers that have an adapt or die business model. The cloud vendor, they want to slam dunk the standard implementations, and then the customer wants an implementation that would allow them to pivot and adapt. So as I mentioned, our session leverages real life lessons that Jess, Spencer, and I learned, and the intent is to help other supply management professionals avoid these problematic implementations by optimizing their procurements. So please join us at our session to learn how.
Well, Spencer, as we all know, COVID-19 has really done a number on a lot of procurement and supply chain processes and dynamics in the last 3 years. Has it been a factor at all? How much of it has it been a factor, if at all, in what we're talking about here?
I think the big shift is the way we work and the way we interact. Mm-hmm. You know, we used to gather together in a conference room with our suppliers at our side during the procurement activity, and we'd be in the room with them while we're seeing their product demonstrations. I don't see us going back to that. You know, we're going to continue to do these types of meetings in the virtual environment. The reality of that shift is that while it was always our role as supply management professionals to promote good communication, the way we work now places an even greater importance, maybe a greater burden on us, the supply management team, to be the hub of communication. The way people work in the virtual environment, on one level, it really creates even greater connection. You know, we're no longer limited by the size of our conference room. Everyone can easily join in when the supplier is putting on their demonstration of their proposed software solution. But it's really a double-edged sword in reality. You know, instead of having 10 or 15 really focused team members in the room together, we now have 50 people joining the show. And when you're in a meeting that size, the tendency is for people to turn off their cameras, and attention can shift to emails and other pressing. Easy for no one to be responsible. The supply management team leading the procurement activity, now more than ever need to be orchestrating really effective communication. It takes more than just having the right people invited to the meeting. We need to be acting as coaches for everyone involved to make sure they understand their role and that they know when it's their time to contribute. That is a value opportunity for supply management professionals to get everyone in sync and to help close the gaps of communication between your business and your supplier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Spencer just stressed the importance of communication, and Jessica, I definitely for communication for a lot of things. The old cliche, the earlier the better, definitely applies, and we've been stressing the importance of being proactive on this as early as possible in the process. What can supply management professionals, like those who are going to be attending ISM World 2023, do early in that process to ensure a successful implementation?
Yes. So from our perspective, it's pretty straightforward. We're believers that successful implementations are solicited for. So conduct a competitive solicitation. Why would you do that? Well, because competition is your friend. When you create a vehicle to bring the supplier pool to the table all at one time, being able to compare and contrast those vendors and to find the strengths and weaknesses of each of them, and then negotiate with each of them to see what their best offer allows, that really kind of creates a level of energy and competition that you can't recreate without the competitive solicitation. Suppliers know when they go through a process like that this is their shot to win or to lose your business for what may be years to come. And if you do it right, we believe that can result in a significantly better negotiated outcome than you could ever achieve without going through that competitive process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then after the negotiation process, you're going to come to the contracting part of it. And Stephen, just what are your thoughts on using a supplier's contract as opposed to maybe your own template?
So, great question.
Mm-hmm.
I feel pretty strongly that supply management professionals should have and use their own contract templates. So if you have viewers out there that aren't using their own contract templates, please run out there, buy some templates, draft some templates. And a good standard is 80% of your deal should be on your paper, your contract template. And the best leverage to use your own paper is to include it as a part of your solicitation document, your RFP. And what you do is you require the respondents to either redline your contract template or to accept it as a part of their RFP response. Obviously, your contract template is going to be more favorable and more efficient for you to use. When you use a vendor's contract template, that's their contract anchor, right? And you're going to spend a lot of time clawing your way up from there, trying to get from really unfavorable terms and conditions to generally unfavorable terms and conditions. And then I mentioned efficiency. When you use your own contract template, you don't have to spend your time redlining someone else's contract. The vendor is going to spend their time redlining yours. Mm-hmm. And as a part of your contract template that you would include with your solicitation, you would include an implementation statement of work template that requires the vendor to get very specific about their roles and responsibilities, what's in scope, what's not in scope of that implementation. And we'll cover that format in the session. One last reason to use your own contract template and implementation statement of work is to avoid what I call weasel words, like a vendor endeavoring to assist or to help. When you have an implementation vendor, you don't want a vendor to endeavor to help to assist you. You want that implementation vendor to implement. So in your implementation statement of work, you want to see words of commitment like shall and will throughout the entire body of that document. So those are some of my thoughts, Dan, and your viewers will definitely hear more of my thoughts, my strong thoughts, if they attend our session.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Spencer, as we discussed this last week, an important resource is something called an AMA, and that stands for Ask Me Anything, as I learned. Can you tell us more a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. It's one of the ways that we are trying to improve communication with the suppliers during the procurement process. We are starting to use what we call Ask Me Anything sessions. And that, for us, we're doing it after initial proposals are received, and we've narrowed the field to maybe 2 or 3 vendors, right? So the focus of that meeting is for the supplier to come to us and really ask anything and everything that they would like to know to help put them in a position to refine their proposal and to deliver the most effective demonstration by our suppliers. And, because of the point in time that we're doing it right before the main event for the suppliers, we're getting a lot of engagement from them and a lot of great questions. And we're seeing this communication gap really shrink. It goes much deeper than what you typically get at a pre-bid question and answer session.
Mm-hmm. And then here's another acronym that a lot of us know, the BATNA, Best Alternative to a Negotiated Agreement. And there's also something along the lines of that, or this process that we're talking about, Stephen. There's something along the lines of that, but not quite. I mean, could you elaborate on what you mean by that?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm sure the viewers know what a BATNA is, which is your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. And of course, a BATNA is what you'd use if the deal that you're attempting to negotiate falls apart, you're at some sort of impasse. Well, in the spirit of BATNA, I coined a new term called BATNI, which means that it's your best alternative to a non-performing implementer. If you've had an implementation that's gone bad because the implementer isn't performing, you need a backup plan. You need a BATNI. And a BATNI could include a contingent vendor. It could include staff augmentation instead of a system integrator doing the work. It could be requesting the product vendor step in with their own system integrator, or even maybe implementing whatever it is using your own staff. These days, unfortunately, the chances that an implementation is going to go bad is pretty good. So unless you have a BATNI, which is a best alternative to a non-performing implementer, you'll likely need to start your procurement process over again from the beginning, from scratch. So Dan, that's my twist on BATNA. You also need a BATNI.
Mm-hmm. And Jessica, how do you know, when an implementation, a supplier or a vendor, how do you know they're capable?
So if you have structured your competitive solicitation to allow for a system integrator as part of the response, then you need to test their capabilities and not just hear about them. So have the implementer conduct the system demo. Insist that the team members conducting the demo be those that will be primary on your implementation and aren't just part of a sales team that's going to walk away once that deal is done. A good implementer should be absolutely thrilled for the chance to show off their knowledge and to provide that valuable insight to you. They want to stand apart from the competition. And I really think if you test them in that capacity, you will see very quickly who does stand apart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just while we've been talking, and I'll let whoever wants to field this question take it. It's kind of stress the importance you've heard throughout the course of the pandemic. Supplier or vendor relationship management is critical, and it sounds to me, just listening to you guys talking, that this is, it doesn't have to be a combative thing or a gunfight at the an old supply chain veteran once described the negotiation process to me, as a gunfight at the OK Corral with suppliers sometimes. And it doesn't need to be that. It doesn't need to be, it needs to be a relationship, like it says in the term. And just how that's evolved in the last 3 years, how it's become so important. And it seems, just hearing you guys talk, that this process becomes a lot easier if you have good relationships with your suppliers to begin with, or if not, it's an opportunity to improve that. Could you just talk about that dynamic? Whoever wants to take that question.
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. I'll take that. So there's some of your viewers, I'm sure, have heard the phrase vendor management, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the twist on that is if you don't manage the vendors, the vendors will manage you.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of what is going to be in our session is really all about expectations, right? Making sure that the implementation vendor understands the expectations, and that your customer also understands what's expected of them. So when we get to that point of implementation, it's not a surprise for the customer and it's not a surprise for the vendor. And a lot of what we talked about already, the Ask Me Anythings, the reverse demos where we demo to the vendor what we're doing now so they can actually see the pain points that we have, and then doing things that just mentioned, like making sure that we have the implementation vendor demoing the product, not the product vendor. And I think that gets us to a better place of understanding of the expectations. And I think when you get on that right foot, that's when you'll have that better relationship with the vendor, as opposed to a misalignment of expectations, and then all of a sudden when you're down the road, you or the vendor are taking out the contract and looking at the contract terms and conditions. Whenever you got to pull out the contract and look at the contract terms and conditions, things aren't going to go well. That's not a good sign. So it absolutely is about expectations and about making sure that everybody understands what's expected of them.
Yeah. Spencer, we may have lost Spencer for a minute. So I'll field this question to Jessica or Stephen, whoever wants to take it. I mean, once a contract is signed, a potential change order could come into play. Just what's your perspective on that, and what should be the game plan when that has to happen?
Yeah. So Dan, I think there's two perspectives on that.
Mm-hmm.
The first is that change orders don't necessarily have to be a bad thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So change orders are a reasonable part of the process. I don't think it's something to be scared of. And I think that as long as you have what that process looks like outlined in your contract, it can be an effective mechanism for both parties to make sure things keep staying on the right track and we keep making progress down the road to get what each party needs and get to the ultimate implementation outcome. I think where change orders can be a bad thing is where, if you've heard the term, death by a thousand change orders, right? Mm-hmm. Change order after change order after change order, you've got a problem. And that could be from one of two sides. That could be from the vendor side, right? The vendor is starting to manage you, like Stephen said. Mm-hmm. And that requires, contract management, effective contract management to keep that relationship on track and to keep that from happening. Or it may be a scenario where the change orders are happening from your internal customer, right? And so maybe there's some scope creep and there's some excitement about what the vendor has to offer, and so that also needs to be managed to make sure that is that really the right thing to get to the objective that we had initially outlined for the implementation. It's oftentimes by adding those change orders, you're adding time and significant amounts of money, and it's prohibiting you from getting to your initial end game. And you don't want to lose sight of that, right? The goal is to get there. And so change orders aren't necessarily a bad thing, but it's definitely a process that needs to be very carefully managed.
Mm-hmm. We do have a question from one of our viewers. Andrew wants to know, what do buyers typically want sellers to be better at?
I'll take that, Justin. You can add on to it. So yeah. I think it sounds really simple, but I think what it really boils down to is to listen and understand, right? I talked about the Henry Ford assembly line of cloud technology implementations. The problem there is that the vendors, unfortunately, they don't necessarily want to take the time to listen. And I think that's critically important. So I think the vendor really taking the time to listen and understand is going to lead to a much more successful implementation. But you can't put that all on the vendor itself. I think some of the things that we've talked about today and that we'll talk about in our session, like the Ask Me Anythings and the reverse demos and the implementation vendor doing the product demos, those are all key parts, I think, of our responsibility as buyers to help the vendors better understand us and our customers.
I completely agree, Stephen.
I mean, we've talked about some of the, issues down the road where if you don't have a successful implementation, you may be cleaning up afterward and it may be costing you money. We've discussed, anything that we haven't discussed, some of the issues that could come up that could come, be trouble downstream. If this is something you don't have your ducks in a row at the start.
There's so much, Dan, and there's definitely more things that we hit on in our presentation. I think we covered it kind of holistically, though, from the perspective that it's really about managing the process effectively on the front end. Stephen just said it's ensuring that everybody's listening. It's ensuring that our internal customer, our business, is setting clear expectations up front. Right, we want the vendors to understand. I think ensuring alignment internally is a really important part of that process as well, because it's hard to have the vendors understand what you need if we're not clear on that as an organization. So I think that's a really key point of it, to kind of make that triangle all come together between, procurement and your business and your vendor, your supplier.
Yeah. I've been talking with Jessica Chapman, Stephen Guth, and Spencer Kraemer. Unfortunately, the tech gremlins got him. But their session is called Successful Implementations Begin at Procurement. It'll be a part of ISM World 2023. And thanks a lot, guys. This has been great. I've learned a lot, as I thought I would. Is there anything that in the time that we have left, a couple minutes, anything that we haven't discussed or that I haven't asked, that you think might be important to include before we sign off today?
Well, Dan, thank you for having us, and thank you to all of the viewers who are with us today. The only thing I would leave the viewers with is make sure you don't miss our session, because it's going to be good.
All right, great. Well, thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate it. Jessica Chapman, Stephen Guth, and Spencer Kraemer, they're with Citizens Property Insurance Corporation. And again, title of their session, Successful Implementations Begin at Procurement. Thanks to our friends for joining us, and especially thanks to you for watching today. We hope you appreciated today's sneak preview and enjoyed it, and that you'll join us at ISM World 2023 on May 7th through 10th, just outside Dallas in Grapevine, Texas. And if you haven't already registered, be aware that our current rate tier will expire after February 28th. So you can save up to $500 by registering before then. To learn more, just visit ismworld.org/annual. And if you'd like to learn more about the sessions at ISM World 2023, we'll have LinkedIn Live sessions on Tuesdays through February. Same time, same platform, and with some more smart people who will bring compelling conference to our conference. They were some of the people that you'll meet at ISM World 2023. For our friends at Citizens Property Insurance, and those who helped out behind the scenes today, their names are Robin Garrison and Haley Minshew. I'm Dan Zeiger. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.